What was a memorable, tender moment for you? Was it nestled up on the couch with that special someone?
Was it this morning when a stranger gave you your first cup of hot tea?
Was it when a friend helped you remember a long forgotten memory?
Was it when someone did something kind for you without you even asking?
Was it a soft whisper, early morning, and a kiss on the forehead?
Was it when the Uber driver turned up the music for your favorite song because he heard you singing it in the backseat?
Was it when you caught someone's eye and they looked at you and you looked at them and you knew?
A memorable, tender moment for me was an encounter with a stranger that said, "I feel you." I was the only Black person in this travel delegation from Elmhurst College to South Africa, my one and only trip to the continent. My travel mates thought that I was sick. I had been in my hotel room for 2 days, but I was sick of them. I was sick and tired of them not understanding how big this trip was for me. I was sick of them not understanding my brokenheartedness at seeing the injustices viewed from my point of view. So I get away from them and I go for a walk and I enter this lovely gift shop and I'm greeted by this petite chocolate African woman. I know she felt my sadness and my loneliness because she offered me warm hospitality and invited me to tea upstairs from the gift shop at her private art gallery. And she takes me up the stairs and she leaves me there, she says, so it could all speak to me. And it did. It spoke to me from generations past. It spoke to me from majesty and history denied, the rich colors, the animal skins, the photographs, the intricate wood carvings. It was stunning. My eyes ached with beauty and filled with tears. I mean, how could she know that was just what I needed? And how could I know such tenderness could be offered to me so far from home? We sit and we imagine together sister strangers at a small kitchen table with 2 chairs and a hot pot for tea in a corner of her gallery. And we imagine, she imagines Oprah and Michael Jordan breaking down her door, demanding to buy her treasures, of course, with a photo spread in Essence magazine. And I talk about returning one day, but next time with real soul companions. And we laugh like we'd always known each other, confirming forevermore the power, the healing power of the kindness of strangers. I returned to my travel delegation feeling so much better. And one of my colleagues says, "Oh, we thought you were sick." And another one said, "Well, but you look refreshed. Where you been?" And I didn't even bother to tell them because they wouldn't have understood the significance of that moment, the depth of the artistry I had bathed in, or the magical, tender place I had just visited.
I was in my car, tapping my steering wheel at a red light, stuck in traffic. Of course, I was overscheduled, late for a meeting, couldn't find the parking lot I was supposed to be in. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. She was holding her walker. Her support hose were pulled around her ankles. Her clogs were barely holding on to her feet. And she stepped off the curb. The walker, 1 foot, stepped together. the walker, 1 footstep together. It was me and 2 other rows of traffic. She was in the middle of my car and the light was already starting to flash red. Then a man came out of nowhere, stood between her and my car. He moved as she moved. The walker, 1 foot, stepped together. The walker, 1 foot, stepped together. Even after she cleared my car, I waited. The light was green. She cleared the next car. The next car waited. The light was still green. We all had decided, us as drivers, that we were responsible for this woman's safety. And it wasn't until the stranger got her to the other side of the street and deposited her on the opposite curb. And he moved as fastly as he came. We drove away. That was 10 years ago. I'll never forget it. I mean, I can't help but wonder what was in this man that made him help this stranger. Was it that his mother always told him, help a lady across the street? Was it part of his faith, always help somebody in need? It also made me remember that if I just stop, if I just watch and listen, the power of humanity is everywhere, and it's even in the middle of the street.
One of the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease can be sundowners. Sundowners sometimes presents itself as pacing or wandering in the middle of the night. And for some people, sundowners presents itself as doing things that seemingly mean and matter nothing to anyone else and make no sense to anyone else. So not only would my daddy forget that he had just eaten a plate of food, even though it was sitting right next to him on the bed, still warm. And not only did he forget that he had to sell the car because he could no longer drive, but I did give him his keys so he could hold them. And not only would he tell the staff version of me that the daughter version of me would cut his hair because the staff version of me had no idea what she was doing. Another thing he would do is he would walk around the house in the middle of the night and collect quarters and nickels and dimes and put them in like piles on his dresser. And he would collect all of the hangers. He would collect the wooden hangers, he would collect the paper hangers from the cleaners, he would collect the plastic hangers, and he would organize them, which was actually quite helpful. Oh, I remember growing up thinking that being in love was supposed to be so much fun. It was supposed to be like going to Great America and wearing matching outfits. It was like going to the plaza and getting the cookie and having it personalized for yourself. It was like having someone call in on WKKC and dedicating a song to you. I never knew that being in love was like my mother leaving the porch light on for him when he would come in from work. And being in love was like my daddy making sure that he got the soup pot down off of the highest shelf because my mother was short and he didn't want her to have to use the step stool. And being in love was like him holding on just a few extra days so that she wouldn't have to be a widow. We went to an exhibit at the Logan Center a few weeks ago, and there was a specific installation in the middle of the room, and there were a gathering of eucalyptus leaves and adinkra symbols and cowrie shells, and right on the side was a basket of rose petals. likely from celebrations long forgotten. And it made me think that we're all just collections of things. Memories, old photographs, and whispers in the wind that remind me that I will always, always be their daughter.
It's late at night. I'm tired and I'm starving. I hold the doorknob. I'm a little apprehensive about entering my home because I don't know what's waiting for me on the other side. I open the door. It's quiet. And I smell something delicious from the stove. So I glance over and I see a pan full of food. I take the time to grab a plate, a fork. I put the food on my plate. I grab a glass from the cabinet, I fill it with water, and I sit down on the couch heavy. I turn on my favorite TV program and I eat my food, enjoying it in this peaceful moment. I finish my water. I'm still thirsty, but I am too tired to get up and to refill it right now. So I look at my phone, check some messages. I look up, my water glass is back, refilled. I take a sip and smile. When I finish my meal, I put the plate and the fork in the sink. I leave my glass on the counter. I'll refill it before I go to sleep. I go upstairs and I put on my pajamas. I'm so tired. I go to the bathroom and I brush my teeth. I go back to the bedroom and I see there's my water glass on the nightstand, magically refilled. I smile and then I hear a voice say, "Good night." I turn around, my husband gives me a sweet kiss and then leaves and closes the door. I go back to bed, I sit, I drink from my water glass, lay down and turn off the light. And as I'm drifting off to sleep, I think how grateful I am for these moments of tenderness that have been freely given to me.
My watch, and perhaps even yours, tells you to stop and breathe and take a mindful moment. It tells us as a reminder that the world's going real fast and we need to slow down. My reminiscent mindful moment is a walk solo on the beach in Hawaii at sunrise. I step into the sand. I feel that cool sand on my feet. I push my feet down into that sand and I feel warmth from yesterday's sunshine. Not hot, but warm. I take a couple of steps forward toward the ocean and the waves meet me and they say, "Hello, good morning." And I smile. And I look out on that sunrise and the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. And I stop and I think, what a small creature I am. I'm ever so thankful for mindful moments to stop, think, breathe, reflect, and understand that what is given to us each day is a level of peace if we only stop to find it.
My grandmother used to call me tender-headed. And here's why. Because what I think she thought was brushing, I actually felt raking. But I was a big girl, so I would sit as still as I possibly could for as long as I could until finally I was like, "Grandma, please stop, that hurts." "Girl, stop squirming. Stop being so tender-headed." Now, I never didn't want my grandmother to comb my hair, despite the fact that she was raking it. I loved the feeling of her fingers in my hair as she twisted it or braided it, or popped that pink sponge roller at the top for bangs, or those sides with those special occasion curls. I always felt so warm and so cared for. The tables turned and it was my turn to comb her hair. And I remembered the raking, so I was hyper vigilant about making sure that pressure was okay for her. By this time, she had very thin, very brittle gray hair. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter what kind of pressure I put on her. She always complained. She squirmed a lot. She often reminded me, girl, that is a head, not a floor. That memory is mirrored with another memory of my parents. My parents had a weekly ritual. They would be on the couch. One would be on the floor, one would be behind the other, and they would do a scratching or an oiling of the scalp. That smell of Vitapoint and Dixie Peach and Afro Sheen and that stank of sulfurate. The sounds of their laughter and their checking with each other of course of the day, and they just were so easy with one another. It's because of them that I've always said I want a head scratching kind of love. And I will know by the way he touches me and my hair that he's the one. Cultures and people all over the world believe that hair is sacred and that it holds energy and that it connects us to spirit. And in a moment of my life when my spirit was completely shattered, I just lost my dad, and my girlfriend came by and she was checking on us and checking on me, and at some point she was sitting on that same couch, and I remember crawling across the couch, and I just laid my head down in her lap. And she let me cry for a little while, and then she started to just stroke my hair. And with each stroke, I felt that brittle spirit soften up just a little bit. And with each stroke, I thought, it's okay. And I had that same feeling that I had when my grandmother was doing my hair, or that same feeling when I watched my parents take care of each other. And in that moment, I knew that I was safe and that I was loved.
I have the wonderful blessing and gift of being the mother of 4 black boys, now young men. And it is a blessing and sometimes a challenge. And one of the challenges is, for me, how to prepare them for this world that when they were little was like, oh, what a beautiful boy. And then as they started to get older was, not the same response. And I think often about how it is preparing them with something that I could not do by myself. And I'm so grateful to have had a village of people who poured into them. And I think about the grandmothers who rocked them, and when I could not get them to stop crying, they knew just the way to hold them, just the way to rock them, just the way to comfort them. I think about the fact that even though my father, who I was so very close to, passed away the day before my 16th birthday, and that I spent so much time regretting that he could not be here with them, he would just show up in unexpected places. And one of the ways I feel like he showed up was in our neighbor downstairs, whose name was Mr. Driver. Now, Mr. Driver was a kind of person who seemed very tough on the outside, but what he was most concerned about was taking care of the people that he loved. And the way that he poured into my boys. When they were babies, he would hold them close and he would rock them and he would whisper, "You are the best boy, the best boy." I will never forget seeing how he held them and whispered to them. And it is my prayer that in the moments when life is turning this way or that against them, that they will remember that whisper, "You are the best, the best."
I am grateful for the healing power of the kindness of strangers.
I am grateful for the power of humanity.
I am grateful for lifelong friendships.
I'm grateful for the love of my family and my friends.
I am grateful for the sunrise and the sunsets in our lives.
I am grateful for the possibility of a head-scratching kind of love.
I am grateful for whispered words of encouragement.
A habit of tenderness.
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 A habit of tenderness. Good evening. I'm Emily Hooper-Lansana, Artistic Director of Soul Collective. Founded in 2020, Soul Collective was formed to support and elevate women of color's voices in the storytelling community and art scene in Chicago. Soul chose the name for many reasons. We are women of the sun, we speak with a soul ancestral heart spirit, and we are telling the stories of our lives. Soul Collective is an artistic response to the continued inequities of how women of color are seen, heard, and interpreted. We produce stories that analyze everyday life rhythms and rituals while examining assumptions, understandings, and beliefs. Soul Collective is unique in its work to voice intergenerational connections and uplift universal experiences of humanity. Tonight's show is entitled A Habit of Tenderness. It is inspired by this quote from Audre Lorde. We have to consciously study how to be tender with each other until it becomes a habit, because what was native has been stolen from us, the love of Black women for each other. But we can practice being gentle with ourselves by being gentle with each other. Let's continue. Our first individual storyteller is Ruby Houghton Pitts. Ruby came to the Soul Collective in 2021 with a desire to learn from a diverse group of seasoned storytellers. Under the watchful eyes of the group, she has learned a great deal about the art of storytelling. She had her storytelling debut in the winter of 2022 and fell in love. She has worked most of her adult life as a business and nonprofit professional, where telling the stories of organizations was key to her success. Nearing retirement, she decided that it was time to tell her own stories, that we have included international travel as a international travel as a child and living or working in every region of the USA as an adult. She and her husband live in Chicago, have 3 adult children, and recently celebrated their 2nd grandchild.
Hello? You know, that ring on your telephone has a history. And in my particular case, it has a love language that it spoke all its own. You see, my parents had an old black telephone that had a dial on it and a very, very long extension cord. That phone sat in the hallway on a phone table, and it had a very long extension cord that wrapped up on a hook. But I'll tell you what, that phone could go all the way down the hall into the 3 bedrooms. It could come all the way back, go into the kitchen, the living room, the dining room. It could go out on the front stoop. And you know what? It could even go into the garage. And on occasion, that phone would even be in the backyard under that big old peach tree. But when you heard that phone ring, it could literally wake the dead. Well, you see, that was a traveling phone, kind of like Hillary Clinton's pantsuit. Because it got to go a lot of places, got a lot of activity with my two older brothers, James and Philip, my sister Felicia, my parents, and me. The great thing about that telephone was that it was unbreakable. You could drop it. You could bang it. You could swing it. You might even be able to throw it. But you couldn't destroy that phone because those old black phones were built to last. Can I get an amen? Very much unlike what you got in your pocket and your purse today, that is here today and gone tomorrow. And they know that. So let me just give you a little idea of, now that we've talked a little bit about that 1960s phone. And I grew up in Southern California in a ranch-style house. And so you know that you could hear, you could see everything, one story, and so on. But I'll tell you, that phone, when I was calling, had a very distinct ring. So I'm out in the street, and that phone had a distinctive ring. I would call it, and I would hear the ring, and I'd feel better about things. Maybe it was because the person on the other end who was going to answer knew me. They could meet my needs. They could come and get me, and they could comfort me in times of trouble. So, like just about everybody in this room, as soon as you got your new phone number, you had to memorize it. So that phone, 622-5825, was the phone number that I remember most in my life. It was because my parents had it for over 2.5 decades. And I got drilled daily as soon as they got that phone. My siblings would say, let me hear you recite your phone number, 622-5825, 622-5825. Parents would come home from work, what's your phone number? 622-5825, 622-5825. So once I knew my phone number, they could turn me loose. I didn't know that. So what they did was they gave me a dime. Put that dime in my shoe. How many of you ever put a dime in your shoe? So the reason why you had that dime in your shoe was so that you could make a phone call home if something went wrong. And yeah, with me, something always went wrong. Somebody didn't pick us up from the movie. We were stuck at the gym or at school, or we were bold enough as little kids to think we could walk home. And it got dark and it got spooky. I dropped that dime in a payphone, and by the way, if you don't know what a payphone is, it's what Superman hopped into, spun around, and put himself out in a whole new giddy-up. So I dropped that in the payphone. I'd hear this familiar ring, and all the tension would fall off of me because I would hear someone say, from my house, hello? And I knew that somebody was coming to get us. So let's fast forward a little bit. I'm a little older. Still got that dime, but it's not in my shoe, it's in my purse. And so, I might be out on a date. I might be out with friends, and sure enough, something went wrong. I'd still pop that dime into the payphone, and I'd call home, hear the familiar ring, and my father would be deployed like the military. So when I went off to college, didn't have to have a dime because I was calling collect. But every Saturday morning, I'd step down into the phone booth, and I'd call collect, and I would hear my mother say, "Hello." Instantly after hearing that ring, I'd hear her voice and I'd be comforted, far away from home. Now, moving into adulthood, you wouldn't think that a grown woman would get salmonella poisoning from a vending machine, but I did. And I was so sick, my husband had to take the kiddos out of the house so that I could get some rest. Well, it clicked for me when I picked up the phone and I started dialing home. I lived in another state. But I was calling home and the phone just rang and rang and rang. And then it clicked. My parents were on vacation. No warm hello on the other end because there was no voicemail. But you know what I did? I dialed that number again and again. I listened to that ring and I reminisced about every single time that I had dialed that number, heard the comfort of the ring. Someone who knew me and loved me said, "Hello," and it made me feel better. Now, I've got all the fancy phones and the equipment, but I'm going to tell you something. There is absolutely nothing like a kind and tender hello on the other end of the phone when you have a need.
Our second storyteller is Keela Moore. Keela started telling stories to improve her communication skills and fell in love with the storytelling process. She joined Soul in the spring of 2023, and through this process, not only has she drastically improved her communication skills, she has also gained an understanding of the profound depth of her stories and the impact they can have on others. She is a Chicago native, wife and mother of two, who works as an IT project manager.
When I first started high school, like many freshmen, I wanted to be around the popular kids. I wasn't popular, and I was a little shy, and they were very intimidating, so I just stayed back, and I watched them from afar, and I admired them. I admired their confidence. One day, I ended up in a room with a popular girl, but she was different. She was nice. Everyone said so, so I mustered up a little courage and I went up to her and I started talking to her. And as we were talking, I realized she is nice. And so I blurted out, "Will you be my friend?" And thankfully, she said yes. I was so excited and happy that I had made friends with someone who was popular. But then we started hanging out. We had lunch together. We would go see the movies. We started to gain a real friendship. One day she gave me a necklace, and I wore that necklace every day for a week. And I told everyone that my friend, the popular kid, gave it to me. We had a wonderful friendship and everything was good until the end of sophomore year when she left. She went to an art school, so I thought, okay, that makes sense. You want to change it up. But then after 6 months, she dropped out of there. I was confused. So I went to talk to her. She told me that she was struggling with her mental health. I had no idea. I had no clue. I asked her to explain it to me because she was the popular girl. She was smart. She had actually scored 100 points higher than me on the SAT, and now she was telling me she dropped out of school and she was going to get her GED. She said, "Yeah, sometimes I have voices in my head and they tell me things. Sometimes I'm really happy and I feel like Superwoman, but then other times I get really down and sad. and I want to self-harm, and I have suicidal ideation. I didn't understand any of this, but I said, okay. I went over to dinner one day with my mom, and we had a lovely dinner with her mom and her. And then she asked me if I wanted to stay over. I said, you know what? I like sleeping in my own bed, so I'm going to go home. The next morning, her mom called, and she told me and my mom that my friend had attempted suicide and was now in the hospital. I couldn't believe it. I was also angry because things had been so great when I left, and if she really needed me to stay over, I would have. My mom asked if I wanted to go to the hospital, and I said, yes, I did. So I went. It was different than visiting anyone else in the hospital. And I was anxious and nervous, and the whole time I thought, all these other people here, they belong here. My friend, the popular girl, she does not belong here. I don't know why we're here. And I sat down and I started talking to her. And I asked her, how could you not tell me I really needed to stay over? You see, I felt guilty. She grabbed my hand and she said, it's not you, it's not me, it's this illness. It was then that I understood and I was able to accept that something greater than both of us was happening, and it was changing our friendship. It was changing her life. She told me she had been diagnosed with bipolar. I had never heard of that. I didn't know anyone else with mental illness, so I had to do a little research later on my own. And she told me to live my life fully, not just for myself, but for her as well. And so that's what I did. I went off, I finished high school, I went to college, I finished college, I started my career, I met a guy, I got married, I had kids. And throughout this time, I would keep in touch with my friend, and I'd ask her periodically when I felt like I was just talking about how wonderful my life was and she was still stuck in the same place, what do you need? What could I do? And she said, your friendship is all I need. So we continued on. And then last year, she warned me that she was starting to have a really bad period. Her voices in her head were getting louder. She was getting compulsed to do certain things over and over again. And then one day she texted me and she warned me. The voices were telling her great harm would come to me unless she said the worst thing she could possibly think of or have ever read and text that to me. And she would rather risk losing my friendship by saying hateful, hurtful things to me than risk not saying them and the voices be right and something come and happen. And then at the end of whatever hurtful things she said, she would say, please forgive me, I'm sorry, will you still be my friend? And I remembered back to that day in the hospital, and it wasn't me, it wasn't her, it was this illness. And I said yes. But then after the third time, I think she knew it was pretty awful what she was saying. I think she knew the first time too. And she said, you know, if you need to block me, please block me. I would love to be friends with you when I'm better. I knew it took a lot for her because I was her best and closest, one of her few friends that she ever had. But receiving messages like that, I knew it would affect me. It would affect us. So I said, okay, so I blocked her. And so for the first time in over 20 years, we stopped talking. We had no contact. I did keep in touch with her mom just to check in to make sure she was okay. And she told me she was. And she told me that she was trying something new called electroshock therapy. I only knew about that from TV and movies, so again, I had to do my research. And then her mom told me she was feeling better enough and she would like to contact me again. Would that be okay? See, she knew that hurtful things that her daughter had said, because she'd said hurtful things to her too. I said, yes, I would accept the call. And so my friend called me and we talked for 10 full minutes. Now that doesn't seem like a long time, but for us it was. Because her illness would make it hard for her to stay focused. The voices would get in her head and tell her things that she'd have to get off the phone. So the fact she was able to talk so long meant something. And she told me that she would like to see me. And I said, I would love to see you. We hadn't seen each other in 2 years. You see, it was hard for her to leave the house. And it was hard for me to get over to see her with my busy life and my family. So when she came over, we embraced for a long time. And we talked and reminisced. And I thought about all that she had been through, all the ins and outs of the hospital over the 20 years, the different medications, the different doctors, all the struggles. And I thought, wow, what can I do? What do you need? And she looked at me and she said, you've already been there. You've already done it. Just your friendship. That's all I need. And I'm grateful for her friendship too. You see, when I was growing up, I thought finishing school, going to college, getting married, having kids, having your career, all these things were just expectations. I didn't think there was anything special. But talking to her every time and seeing how much she struggled to hold a job and to get through the day, and how much she turned around and admired me for my ability to do what I was accomplishing, made me realize that I was successful, that everything I was doing was great, it was worthy, and I was enough. And I'm also grateful that my friend is still out there. Thank you, friend, for fighting every day for your mental health. And thank you for listening to our story.
Our next storyteller is Michelle Hughes. Michelle has stepped into many different roles on this life's journey. She has been a political worker, a faculty member, a pastor, and an entrepreneur. Currently, she loves holding sacred space for creativity that includes writing and percussion therapy. This is her debut with the Soul Collective. This child of the movement shares her musings on her blog, Reflections of an Aging Revolutionary on WordPress. She is a mother of two who is still committed to keeping the faith and yearning for justice.
I had this job at City Hall. You ever had one of those jobs? It's a good job, but you need to get out of it. Well, I had carried around my application to seminary in my purse for a whole year. You see, I wasn't sure about the church thing. I wasn't sure about the Jesus thing, but I was absolutely certain about the I want to help Black people thing. So I mailed the application, and I was going to meet my friends for a drink, and I was going to announce my plans. And as I got dressed to go out in something that might catch someone's eye, and my mother's hand-me-down car, she had just gotten a new car and given me her powder blue Chevy Impala with white leather interior. I was ready to go. Of course, I was running a little late, babysitter issues. But I'm on my way. I get on the Dan Ryan. I get off at 31st Street. I'm coming up to the viaduct. There's a stop sign, and I witness a semi-trailer hit a car, and the car spins around and hits the curb. And I think, I don't need this. I'm trying to go out. And I look around, and there is no one, not a pedestrian, not another car, not anybody, not a cat running across the road. I am the only witness. And I think, this is gonna ruin my evening. The truck driver, he's on his radio signaling for help, and they have told him to stay put. So I get out of my car, I approach him, and as we're talking, we see a police car. And we wave for him to stop. They slow down, and when they see we are both Black, they roll down the window and say, if you need help, you need to call the police station on the east side of the Dan Ryan, where they help people like you. And they drive away. We stand there stunned. And then we realize we never looked inside the hit car. So we approach the car and we see some heads moving around. I open the back door and 3 grown men with bloody foreheads tumble out. And they see my powder blue Chevy Impala with the white leather interior. And uninvited, they run towards my car, demanding I take them to the hospital. Meanwhile, the truck driver opens the driver's side and 2 more grown men, bloody foreheads, get out, and they all are in my car demanding I take them to the hospital. Now, I gotta tell you, I was pretty annoyed. Why would I wanna help some people? Not only did I not know, I didn't wanna know them. And then this little voice in my head is like, wow, so you wanna go to seminary? Okay. Okay, so I get in my car and I am just so bothered because they keep reaching up, turning the rearview mirror so they could see their wounds. Man, you messed up. Am I messed up, man? No, you really messed up. And I'm like, let the thing go. We make it to St. Bernard Hospital. And I go in and do the right thing. I go up to the desk. And again, that little voice. And I promise you, every Bible story about the Good Samaritan, every quote about helping the least of these floods into my brain. I leave my information at the desk. They send out 2 orderlies to help 2 of the men out, and then wheelchairs to help the others. And these brothers, who looked like they killed their parents, who smelled like that loud skunk weed, exited my car with not even a nod or thank you. And it was fine, because they weren't really my kind of people. And again, that voice, wow. So here you are, how are you gonna minister to anybody? And you don't wanna help someone so clearly in need. So I did the right thing. Look at my watch, still got time to make it to the club though. So I get there and I share my harrowing tale with my friends. We have a big laugh. I share my news and I look down and notice there's a little spot of blood on my blouse. But the evening ends well. Well, the next morning in the light of day, I go down to see the damage on my powder blue Chevy Impala with the white leather interior. And it was a mess of muddy footprints and smeared blood all over the seats. Luckily, with some cleaning supplies and a bucket and a sponge, I was able to remove most of it. And as I was cleaning it up, I thought, I am so grateful for all those Bible stories, for all those quotes about helping the least of these and doing the right thing, that helped me to help people in need, even if I did it with a little bit of attitude.
Coming to the stage now is Terry A. Johnson. Terry has written stories since she was a child. She began telling them when she joined the Soul Collective in 2020. Using her voice to speak truth to power is at the center of her work, both personal and professional. A second-generation Southsider, she is a fusion of public schools, free street theater, basement house and funk parties, black church pews, Harold's mild sauce, and Gladys's catfish and spaghetti.
This year, Northwestern played Howard for its homecoming game. First time an HBCU has ever seen that field. And when I heard about it, I had to be there because I knew that was going to be the most black people that I'd ever seen at any time, at any moment at that university. It was amazing. We were everywhere. It was this mixture of the family reunion with no creepy uncles and the church picnic with freshly churned homemade vanilla ice cream and that red velvet cake made by Sister Martha, who is the mother of Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church. And that girl trip with your ride or die, laugh until they make you cry crew, all wrapped up into this big, beautiful, luscious, delicious bundle of black joy. I've never been so happy in that place. I was so excited I had to contain myself. I just wanted to run up people and hug them all day. I had never felt like that when I was a student at Northwestern. Northwestern was a complicated place for me. It wasn't the academics, it was the culture, the environment, the whiteness, as it were. Despite the fact that we actually had our own little mini HBCU. We had a strong black student organization. We had our own black house, which was sanctuary, a sacred space, a space that they tried to take away from us last year, and we had to fight to keep it. We had a strong Black Greek network. We had faculty and administration and black staff who fought every single day to make that place useful and safe for us. We had our own talent show that rivaled WAMU. It was called Out the Box. And we had the ritual. The ritual was a gathering the weekend before we were starting school in the fall. And we would come together, and at the end of the ritual, we were given the link of a chain. And that chain was a reminder of our ancestors and our tribes and who we were and the sacrifices that had made to even get there. But it was also a reminder of our connection to one another, our responsibility, our obligation to take care of one another. My freshman roommate was Sue. She was from Ann Arbor. I'd never been that close to white privilege in my life. This is a woman who had the luxury of never doing anything for herself. And we got along for the most part. I did a lot of myth busting that year. Yes, I wash my hair. No, you cannot touch it, and you can't touch anybody else's. Yeah, I do like soul food. Watermelon is a personal favorite, but it's not the only thing that I eat. Yeah, my dad was in the house, and he was not a unicorn. It was not unique to have black fathers and black men in my community. Been on a plane, been out of the country. I tan, yes I do. Please don't put your arm next to mine to see who's darker. I often was marveling at how she seemed surprised by my humanity. That somehow our similarities didn't quite mean anything to her. And take that, multiply that by hundreds of people who are making assumptions about who I am and what I'm capable of. Students, professors, university police officers, staff members. They used to get this really weird grin on their face. I never quite understood the meaning of that smile. Is that condescension? Is that confusion? Is that discomfort? I need to believe that for some of them, it was trying to make a connection that they didn't know how to make and I didn't know how to make. Now, I was prepared. I come from a black family. I knew that life as a black woman meant I was going to have to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard, 4 times as hard, maybe not get as far. I knew that they were going to question my ability. I knew that it was going to be rough. My parents prepared me the best way they could, but I'm not entirely sure you can actually prepare people for the daily weight of racism and sexism. And it was hard. There were lots of really difficult days and nights. And on one particular difficult night, I was in my dorm room and I just had it. I was tired, I was angry, I was frustrated. And I just decided, I'm out here, I'm gone. So I leave the dorm room, I'm walking to the lakefront. One of the perks of going to Northwestern is you're right on the lake. It's 2:00 in the morning, and you know, college campuses give you this false sense of security that you don't get anywhere else in the world. I'm walking out there. I sit on the lake, on the rocks, and I just start to cry. The anxiety leaves, and I start to cry. So I don't hear Harry walk up to me. Harry's part of the Southside tribe. Terry, is that you? Hey, yeah. Hi, Harry. This is going to sound like a weird question because I can see that you're crying. Are you okay? So I do what I often do when people ask me if I'm okay. I lied. I'm fine. I'm good. He looked at me in disbelief and said, do you mind if I sit down? Can I join you? And I said yes, because in that moment I was tired of being alone. We didn't talk. We just sat there for a while and we watched the water and we watched the moon. And after a while he said, you know, when I see the water and I look at the stars in the sky and the vastness of this universe, I just think how insignificant we are. But I also think about how we are never really alone. We may not be able to see spirit, but we can feel it, especially when we're still. And after a while, he asked me if I'm ready to go back to the war, back to that undercurrent of not quite ever feeling welcome. And I say, yeah, we can go back. He walks me to my dorm, and as I'm standing in the doorway, he says, better? And I'm honest this time. This time I say, no. Not really, not yet, but I will be. And ultimately, I was. I survived and lived through Northwestern the way I have survived every other challenging moment in my life, with the love and the support of my family, tapping into networks that already existed and building my own, and with the love and the support of friends who in the middle of the night show up, ask me how I am, don't believe me when I say fine, and never leave me alone. They never leave me alone. Thank you for listening.
Our next storyteller is Shelley A. Davis. Shelley is a South Side Chicago native. She lives with her husband and 2 teenage children in Bronzeville in an 1889 brownstone that always needs more work. In 2017, Shelley became inspired to become a storyteller while she was driving down the highway crying while listening to an NPR radio story. Shelley's stories are true personal essays. She believes that storytelling is a way to transmit humor, love, and insight. In 2020, she co-founded Soul Collective, an organization of women of color focused on putting their voices at center stage to celebrate their truths.
I was in the basement of a luxury hotel. I was nude, nestled between 1,000-count sheets, those really soft, good ones, on a heated massage table, waiting for my masseuse to show up. She entered the room and she said, "What kind of pressure would you like? Would you like firm? Would you like tender?" I said medium. She started working on my back and my neck and my shoulders, and I immediately fell into a twilight rest. I was dreaming I was walking home. And it was the before times when things seemed a little bit easier. I just leave work, get on the Green Line, get off at 43rd Street, walk down the stairs, and I'd wave at the woman in the box. You know, that CTA box where you used to slide your token or slide your fare, and I don't know what people do in the box anymore, but she was still there. She always had her hair really beautifully done. Her makeup was flawless. The color on her nails was different every single day. And she would always wave and smile back. It made me feel good because I knew when I waved at her and when she saw me, I was one step closer to home. So I was walking down the stairs, I wave at the woman in the box, and I turn left to walk east on 43rd Street, and I turn right to walk south on King Drive, and I'm looking at the green grass and the beautiful green trees and the blue June sky when I hear my massage therapist say, "I can't help but wonder what is happening in this woman's life to make her neck and her back and her shoulders be so hard, so firm, so stressed." Now, I was already nude, but now I was fully exposed. You see, I was far away from home. I was more than 1,000 miles away from home. I was nestled in the mountains in Aspen, Colorado. I had tacked on one vacation day after a business seminar just to be me. I wasn't hiding from my life, but I was focused on just me, just that one day. But her question made everything, all of my reality, just flood back. First, I thought about my kids, older teenagers who are challenging us to evolve our parenting style. This isn't just about care and feeding anymore. It's about guidance and thought partnership and support and questions and listening. I thought about my mother, 90 years old, who had a stroke last year that turned her life inside out, that turned me into a full-time caregiver. So now it's not just my schedule, it's her schedule. It's not just my doctor's appointments, it's her doctor's appointments. It's not just my medication, it's her medication. It's not just my time, it's her time. It's all the things. And of course, I do this out of love and daughterly obligation. I thought about our marriage, 23 years. Half empty nesters, that's a different kind of communication, that's a different life. What does it mean to listen deeply and positively and think about what we want and what does the other person need? And then I thought about me. As a Black woman CEO, as working in community and society that likes to leverage our profile, our proximity to community, our social networks. But our voices are too big. Our opinions are too strong. And hell, forget about pay equity, right? I decided that at that moment I was going to reclaim my imagination. I wanted to start daydreaming out loud. I decided I was going to have a series of secret brunches with friends I want to grow old together so we could share what we think our future could be and speak it into existence and then create it and build it together. So I didn't know this massage therapist. I wasn't going to answer her question, right? You know? I mean, I was never going to see that woman again. But I wanted her to know that I heard her. So I took a deep breath and I exhaled. And I said, "Oh, you have no idea. Thank you."
Our next storyteller is Melody R. Waller. One of Melody's favorite childhood activities was reading stories that she'd written out loud to her mom. One of her not so favorite activities was how her mom would edit the stories out loud as her dad would listen in the background. Born and reared and always representing the South Side of Chicago, Melody spends her days helping those living in the margins understand and navigate the complexities of the healthcare system by telling their stories. This is her debut with Soul Collective, and she dedicates it in honor and memory of Oscar and Helen Waller. May their stories live on forever.
I remember my mother's friendships. She had 4 very close friends: Audrey, Brenda, Lovey, and Dolores. She held all 4 of her friendships in a very sacred and a very special place. But this story is specifically about my godmother, my Auntie Dolores. But it's actually also about her husband, Frank. Well, it's actually also about the season of autumn. I remember when my mother's cell phone rang. We had just left a particularly rough chemotherapy treatment, and all we were going to do that afternoon was get a bite to eat. I was going to make my mother a cup of tea and wrap her in a thick, warm blanket. But I could tell by the look on her face that that was about to change. I looked at her nurse and I said, I can't figure out what's going on, but our afternoon is going to change. My mother looked at me and she said it was my Auntie Dolores on the phone, and Frank's health had taken a turn for the worst, and so we had to go. I remember being so disappointed because I knew she was tired. But she knew more than I knew, because the 4th grade had been a long time ago. You see, they grew up together. They were friends all of their lives. I remember all 3 of them were always on the phone together laughing at my Uncle Frank's ridiculous practical jokes. They told stories about Gulfport, Mississippi, and boiled corn, and crabs, and fishing trips. I remember they talked about growing up in high school, So many stories. If the tenderness of their friendship could have been the sickness and health vow, it would have been a storybook romance. When we arrived at hospice, they held hands together, and I went and I sat in the corner. I remember that they exchanged looks. Something was different about this time. My mom and my auntie Dolores came and they sat in chairs, and then my mom reached up and she untied her scarf because she realized that this was the first time my auntie Dolores would have seen her bald head. So Auntie Dolores reached up and she kind of caressed her head, and they looked at each other with this long sigh. But in the very next moment, they just started talking to each other and whispering like little girls do. The very next week, my auntie Dolores, my mother, and I attended my Uncle Frank's memorial service. I remember it was so cold that day, and there were so many people in the church. I remember reaching over to grab my mother's hand, and her fingers felt cold, likely from the neuropathy. So she couldn't feel the warmth of my hand. A little over a year later, my auntie Dolores stood next to me at my mother's memorial service. And she reached over to grab my hand. And I felt that. And last year, as the leaves on the trees turned a beautiful garnet and gold and purple color, and they started to blanket the ground, my auntie Dolores' son, Michael, called me and asked me to come. And I went without hesitation, because the 4th grade had been a long time ago. The leaves of autumn teach us about the summer and the joy and the exuberance and the spring's anticipation. They act as a bridge to the grace and the silence of spring and winter. The leaves of autumn teach us that it is okay to cry and to laugh. And it is okay to dance and to be still. And the leaves of autumn teach us that it is okay to hold on and to let go. And I too agree with the leaves.
Our final individual storyteller is our host, Emily Hooper Lansana, the artistic director of the Soul Collective. For more than 30 years, Emily has performed, curated, and taught storytelling. She often performs with performance duo In the Spirit. Her storytelling has taken her to stages across the country, Her work seeks to give voice to those whose stories who are often untold, especially those in the African diaspora. She is honored to be a 2021 Three Arts Award recipient. Emily is the proud mother of 4 powerful sons and 1 amazing granddaughter.
You know, one of the most challenging things about being a storyteller is trying to find the right story for the right moment. And in 2020, I was really struggling with what are the stories that we are supposed to be telling right now. Not only because we're in our houses in this moment of crisis where people are dying all around us, but because we have an up close and personal look at the way that racism is ripping us apart. And I remember calling a friend who is an amazing storyteller and talking to her about this question: what are the stories that we are supposed to be telling right now? And what came to me was, this is the moment for High John the Conqueror. Now, if you have not heard about High John, I will tell you that High John, it is said, was the spirit who would show up. They say sometimes he would come to the plantation in the middle of the night when somebody was thinking about leaving, and High John would show them the way to go. They say that sometimes when people had been beaten and their wounds were wide open, that High John would whisper, mix this herb with that herb with this herb, and it will bring you a healing. They say that High John knew how to talk to the people when they were in the middle of the field and feeling like they wanted to give up, and that High John would say to them, just be still and I'll take you somewhere. And they would look like they were standing right there, but High John would take them all around everywhere. And when they came back to themselves, they were stronger. They were more powerful. Something told me the stories that we need right now are High John stories. And then, as I began to reflect on my own life, I wondered, is High John still here? Really? Is High John something that was from a long time ago? Or is High John still here when we need it? And as I looked over my life, I thought about how there have been moments where I have been deeply and profoundly betrayed, where I felt that perhaps I could not continue, but somehow I got up and I kept going. And I thought, you know what? High John keeps showing up. You know, there are some folks who say, I can't wait until you tell the story of that trauma that you went through. And I keep thinking, I don't want to tell that story. I want to tell the story of how I keep standing. That's the story that I want to tell. And I can tell that story because there's a spirit like High John who keeps showing up in the middle of the night when we are at our darkest point, when we feel like we cannot go on, that somehow rocks us, holds us, carries us, encourages us, helps us get up when we thought we could not stand, and reminds us that somewhere, somehow, we have always and continue to know how to be free. Thank you. What a powerful and transformative night this has been. On behalf of Soul Collective, I'd like to extend a sincere thanks to our donors, Hetherington Family Foundation, Lynx Hall, Riva and David Logan Center for the Arts, Illinois Humanities, and the team here at CANTV for such an incredible platform, to our wonderful studio audience, and to each of you watching for spending some of your precious time listening to our stories. In times such as these, tenderness is one of the best gifts you can give to yourself and each other. Good night.